crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with host David Lamb and the attorneys of Hollis Wright.
Hello and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Got a really interesting panel of guests, a super interesting topic. The only thing missing is you, and we would love for you to be a part of the conversation all throughout the program. You'll notice at the bottom of your screen ways that you can join our conversation and be a part of the show. As I often say, and it's the truth, the show is always better the more you are involved, so please join us in this conversation. One other note I want to make before we get to our panel of experts tonight is Hollis Wright makes available attorneys from the firm who are standing by live to speak with you. They're available each and every time the attorneys hits the air, but only for the amount of time we're on the air. So you have about 30 minutes if you would like to speak with an attorney from Hollis Wright. That's a free, off-air, and confidential conversation, and yours for the taking. Leading our conversation is the managing director of Hollis Wright, Josh Wright. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you too. Hope you had a great week, Dave.
I did indeed. I hope you did too.
You know, I hope people take us up on this 30-minute segment that we've got here, because we're here every Sunday night. Of course, we're here during the week to be able to answer questions. And honestly, we get a lot of calls and texts and emails. We can't handle everything every single week, but we do our best, and we ultimately get to people that contact us on Sunday night. So hopefully they'll take advantage of it.
Me too.
It's a good opportunity. All right, so we're talking tonight about asbestos. And the types of medical conditions that asbestos can cause, including cancers. We have brought an expert on, Pat Keahey, who has been involved in this type of litigation for many, many years, is well known in the bar as being an expert in this area. And a lot of people still ask, why is asbestos still going on? And he's going to be able to explain to us why today. So Pat, first of all, thank you for being on.
Thank you.
It's great to have you on. And how did you get involved in this litigation? Because it's been going on for a while, but there are not a lot of lawyers that are really good in this area, and you're one of them. How did you get involved in it?
Well, I first got involved in asbestos litigation. I was hired by a firm here in Alabama in 1991 to start working with the unions. The unions were, as a group, the most adversely affected by asbestos, and from there on I continued to work and handle only asbestos cases, and that's the only kind of legal work I have performed since 1991. There's cases of mesothelioma, lung cancer, and lately has developed now that ovarian cancer, certain types of ovarian cancer are related to asbestos exposure.
Let's walk, we're going to unpackage each of those. Why is asbestos still as important today from a litigation perspective as it was 10 years ago? What is it about asbestos that kind of continues?
Well, the reason asbestos continues even is the word latency. Medically, it takes about at least 20 years or more likely usually 35 years for asbestos cancer to show up in a man or a woman after they've been exposed to asbestos. So people that were exposed 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago can still show asbestos cancer, develop asbestos cancer today. That's why the litigation is going on. The vast majority of asbestos products stopped being used in the United States by 1986, but the talc manufacturers continued to produce talc products that had asbestos in them until just a few years ago. So that's one reason asbestos continues, and also there were millions of people were exposed to asbestos in this country from World War II until the 80s and 90s on a wide scale, on an intensive scale, and people are living longer now, so therefore we still see cases of mesothelioma and lung cancer and ovarian cancer, and this will probably continue for another 15 years at least. You
know, David, the way that these cases have been litigated, where early on, people were able to bring suit directly against certain manufacturers.
Right.
And today there are more funds set up that people have access to. So the litigation itself has changed just a little bit, but the requirement to establish what potential manufacturers may be involved and may have manufactured the asbestos is still as important today as it has been traditionally.
I'm curious, who are the most likely, it's a question we actually have, who's most likely to get asbestos cancer? My late father-in-law had it. He worked at a foundry. Is that one of the most common groups to get affected by asbestos?
Yes, they're foundry workers. A lot of asbestos was used in foundries here in Alabama and across the United States. And the use of it was found used quite a bit in the steel industry. U.S. Steel here in Birmingham used a lot of asbestos from World War II up until the late 80s. We have a lot of foundries here in Alabama, shipyards in Mobile, power plants that furnish electricity to everybody in Alabama. Those plants used a lot of asbestos, paper mills, chemical plants, and even auto mechanics who were working on brakes and clutches on motor vehicles. Asbestos was in brakes and clutches until the late 1980s.
Hey, and explain that. Asbestos, what was it used for during those time frames? Because there are a lot of younger folks that don't really understand what asbestos really was. They hear this term and this phrase that lawyers use, but what was asbestos generally used for?
Asbestos was generally used as an insulator. It's a natural mineral. It's mined. Most of the asbestos used in the United States came from Canada, and the rest came from South Africa. But it's a natural mineral, excuse me, just like coal, water. But it's used to retain heat and control heat, but it also can be used to control acid and other types of mediums in an industrial setting. It is basically the backbone and insulations. It holds basically the silica and the clay were the most common type ingredients in insulation. It holds it together like a backbone. And if you've ever seen reinforcing steel rods and concrete work, that's what asbestos was to insulation. It basically just held the rest of the material together. It's an extremely tough substance, mineral, and once you get that in your body, it stays there. But the good news is, by what I've seen, only about 5% of the people exposed to asbestos will ever show any kind of cancer like mesothelioma, lung cancer, or ovarian cancer.
Out of curiosity, and I hate to put you on the spot if you don't know this answer, but you seem to know a lot about this, but how long did we use asbestos before we knew that it was dangerous and deadly?
Right, and that's a good question, is how long was asbestos used before it was known it was dangerous? The leading manufacturer knew before World War II, and by the mid-1930s, it was Johns Manville. They had done lab tests on animals, and they saw the rats develop cancer. But by the early 1960s, the asbestos industry as an industry knew asbestos would cause cancer in people that it was exposed to. The reality, though, is that most of the companies continued to use asbestos in their products to at least 1980, quite a number of them until the late 80s. And the companies that use TALC is naturally contaminated with asbestos. Talc contains asbestos. It's hard for people to believe that even now, but it's true. So it was known to be dangerous at least by 1964, but none of the companies began to take it out of their asbestos-containing products or warn about that danger until about 1980.
Wow. So, hey, I know we're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, I want Pat to talk a little bit about one of the important things that he does with his expertise is identifying manufacturers that could be involved in specific cases that he's got. So I want to talk a little bit about how that identification process happens.
All right, that's fantastic. We're going to step aside our first break of the evening. Stay tuned. More of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis, Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show 8 years ago, my hope was we would be able to do what we do best, which is to help people answer real-world legal-related issues they have in their life.
People oftentimes are confronting various legal issues and problems in their lives that range across the gamut of legal practice areas. Bankruptcy, criminal law, family law, just to name a few. And to be able to have a 30-minute platform or format to where we can just cover various legal topics once a week, that's obviously the primary focus of the show.
That we would be able to use the resources of the many lawyers we have at this law firm to create a plan that had a lasting impact that also gave back to the community at the same time. And I think we've done just that with The Attorneys.
Welcome back into The Attorneys. Before we get back to our conversation, I want to remind you that attorneys from Hollis Wright are standing by live even as we speak, all throughout the program tonight. That's a live, free, off-air, and confidential conversation. It's a great opportunity, so take advantage of it. Again, going on for about the next 15, 20 minutes or so. Josh?
All right, so Pat, when we went off to break, I wanted to talk about identification of the manufacturer that may have manufactured a specific asbestos for cases that you have. That is a complicated process that only someone that knows what they're doing can do. How do you generally manage that process?
Well, the question about is what we call PID, or product identification, in asbestos litigation. Primarily, it starts with the victim. If he's still alive, you ask him what he was exposed to, and try to get him to think back about brand names and labels that he saw on packages or containers of insulation asbestos products, and sometimes you can show him photographs to refresh his memory. And then if the victim is deceased, it's of course my job to piece cases together, and we do. Most of the people that come to us, the victim has already passed away. So then we reach out to men and women that worked with that person, ask them what do they recall about seeing on brand names on boxes, bags, containers in the workplace that I know contained asbestos, and that's how we put the product identification puzzle together. It's my job to do that. And we also have databases. I have litigated in thousands of cases now in Alabama and other states, and we compile databases, and we can fall back on those databases excuse me, to show what asbestos products were used at a particular job site, like for instance U.S. Steel or Alabama Dry Dock Mobile or Redstone Arsenal or Browns Ferry and the TVA system, or Culvert Steam Plant, or SIPCO or the foundries out in Anniston. We have databases set up where we already have evidence by deposition and affidavit of asbestos containing products that other people have identified in past years.
And do you file these cases directly against the manufacturer, or are there administrative processes that you use to be able to file something administratively and then it's managed through a court? How does that work?
Right. In asbestos, it's different from any other form of civil litigation in the United States. There's two avenues of compensation. The first is the traditional where you file a lawsuit against a variety of asbestos manufacturers in court, in state court or federal court, and it can be anywhere from 10 or 20 up to about 80 different defendants are usually named in an asbestos suit. And then the second avenue of compensation is to file claims on companies, asbestos companies that have set up trust for individuals to file claims on. They have bankrupted their asbestos liabilities, but they still have set aside quite a bit of substantial money in these trusts, and you file claims on those trusts that you feel like your client, the asbestos, the victim or his family would qualify for those claims. You file those claims and receive money from the trust over a period of several years. So those two avenues of compensation.
Yeah, you know, David, over the years, the mesothelioma and lung cancer were primarily the telltale cancers that folks were looking for. As Pat's mentioned, ovarian cancer has become a big component to the TALC side of this puzzle. And so, you know, these lawyers that are really experienced in this area have definitely started focusing more and more on that because there are a lot of manufacturers that manufacture talc.
My late father-in-law did have mesothelioma, and one of his regrets was he was offered just a cash payout settlement to sign something and kind of go away. Mm-hmm. At the time, it seemed like a bunch of money, but he really had medical issues for the remainder of his life, and it far surpassed that amount of money. Yeah. Is that a common mistake that people make? Because I don't know that he got any sort of legal consultation at all. Yeah. He just accepted the money and kind of went his own way. Is that a common mistake you all see from folks? And should that be a red flag? If someone's willing to offer you just a lump sum to go away and be quiet, you probably need to talk to an attorney about what's going on here.
Yeah, Pat, I'll let you talk on the meso front.
Okay. Well, I think the question you're presenting there is in perhaps you're thinking about workers' compensation or the typical type of lawsuit in the United States. If a car hits you, you sue one person or you sue one company, and that person or that company will offer a lump sum to settle, but it doesn't work that way in asbestos. There were several hundred different corporations in the United States that made about 8,000 different asbestos products from World War II up until the late 80s. So in a typical asbestos suit, you will file claims against anywhere from just 10 or 20 defendants' claims and a lawsuit up to as many as 80 different defendants. And so there will never be just one lump sum offered in an asbestos case to settle the entire case with you. That would be very rare to see that. So in asbestos, there are multiple defendants that will offer different amounts of money. There's no one trust or one fund set aside for asbestos victims. A lot of people think that's the case, but that's not true. We file claims on a wide variety of different companies, and we receive different amounts of settlements from each company. And that takes anywhere from just a couple of years. Sometimes these things can go on 4 or 5 years.
When we, I know we're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk about a couple things. One is on the talc side, some of the products that are well known to have carried asbestos in the talc that Pat handles. And I also just want to talk generally about some of the defenses the talc manufacturers can use, like, for example, smoking and the impact that may have had on someone. Let's talk a little bit about that, and we'll unwrap it when we come back.
All right. We're stepping aside our final break of the evening. As we do so, I want to remind you about Hollis Wright and social media. Wherever you are, they are. They are on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. So a great educational, informational resource for you, especially when it comes to law. So check them out there. Stay tuned. We're coming right back.
I'm attorney Carter Clay with Hollis, Wright Law Firm. If you've ever been involved in a civil lawsuit or been a witness to an accident, then you may have been asked to give deposition testimony. In this week's Legal 411, we are answering the question, what is a deposition and why am I being asked to give one? Depositions involve the process of a person giving under oath testimony that is outside of court. The person giving deposition testimony is referred to as the deponent. Depositions are taken in the presence of a court reporter, and the court reporter records the testimony. After the deposition, the attorneys for the parties received a typed transcript that contains all the questions that were asked by the attorneys, as well as the answers given by the deponent. The purpose of taking depositions is to ensure that the attorneys for the parties have a full and complete understanding of the events giving rise to the lawsuit, as well as an understanding of the testimony that they can expect to hear from witnesses at trial. Another reason an attorney might want to get deposition testimony is that it allows the attorneys to better prepare for trial and to develop a strategy for presenting the case to a judge or a jury. At trial, the deposition testimony can be used in several ways. First, if a witness on the stand deviates from the deposition testimony, an attorney can use the deposition to impeach the witness. Also, if a witness forgets certain facts or events, the deposition can be used to refresh the witness's recollection. Finally, in some instances when a witness simply cannot attend trial, the trial judge has the authority to allow the deposition testimony to be read to the jury. If you are a party to a lawsuit and are requested to give deposition testimony, your attorney will likely spend a significant amount of time preparing you for the deposition process to put you at ease and make you feel comfortable. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WBTM 13.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. One final segment remaining in the show, so if you want to take advantage of that opportunity to speak with the attorneys from Hollis Wright who are standing by live to speak with you, you got about 5.5 minutes to do so. Josh?
Let's talk just a little bit, Pat, about some of the defenses that are used by these trusts and the manufacturers in your cases. Smoking as an example, I've heard people sometimes believe that smoking is catastrophic as a defense for purposes of filing an asbestos case. That's not necessarily true, is it?
No, that's, smoking is something that we see quite often, especially in the older population that was exposed to asbestos. Most of the men that worked in trade or industry back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, they smoked. But the kind of arrangements and settlements we've worked out with the companies that have gone into bankruptcy, we can get almost the same amount of money for a smoker as we can for a non-smoker. Mesothelioma, which is the name all of you see on TV now on advertisements, that is a cancer that is caused only by asbestos. Smoking cannot cause mesothelioma nor make a person more susceptible to mesothelioma, so smoking is never a defense to this cancer called mesothelioma. Mesothelioma is a cancer that usually hits men and women in their lungs, and about 20% of them get it around in their stomach area. Ovarian cancer, smoking can be used as a defense there, but usually, from what I've seen, it has, since it's a very new form of asbestos cancer that was first introduced at Harvard University in 2017 by some studies up there, smoking has not been a factor in ovarian cancer cases that I have seen to this point. Lung cancer, everybody thinks about lung cancer as being caused only by smoking, but if you were also exposed to asbestos in an industrial or in construction or industrial work, and you smoked, you actually have a 50 times greater chance of getting lung cancer. It's what we call a synergistic effect. And so the asbestos companies are the ones that have to bear the brunt of that. And but smoking does not keep people from having asbestos claims.
Let's talk a little bit about talc, because that has been, over the last decade, a much more significant component to the asbestos world as it was in the past. How does talc really play into this, and who are some manufacturers that produce talc that may have been used by individuals that can cause certain types of conditions?
Right. As to talc, the name that most people would realize or recognize, but it's perhaps hard to believe, it is Johnson & Johnson, the common baby powder that everybody's seen and used in their lives. Johnson baby powder actually did have small amounts of asbestos in it. That is coming to bear now in litigation here with guys like me that handle asbestos cases and cases of mesothelioma and ovarian cancer especially. Talc is a natural mineral, just like asbestos is a natural mineral, but the talc has also been shown to geologically form asbestos bodies within a formation of talc when it's mined. And Johnson & Johnson had the biggest mine up in Vermont. But talc was used in this country on a wide basis, especially in female cosmetic products. Brand names best known are Avon, Chanel, CoverGirl, as well as products, Cashmere Bouquet and Desert Flower. But it's about now between 50 and 100 different female cosmetic products that contain asbestos.
Yeah, you can see those are
big names.
Yeah, big names for sure.
We got about time just for a final thought, and just if you go first, just 30 seconds from you, just a final charge for our viewers, if you would. Final thought.
My final thought is, don't try to figure out this. The best thing to do is contact an attorney who handles this and call them, and if you call me, I'll be glad to help you, and there's no charge for what we do.
You know, David, what I would say is this has been a ever-evolving type of litigation for many years since I've been practicing law. And the lawyers that are in the asbestos space, you can tell they know their business. They understand how to help people get compensated through this process. It can be a very complicated process, but the litigation is ever changing, as we've seen with talc and some of the talc lawsuits over the years. And so, you know, you don't want to go it alone. You want to make sure that you've got someone that's an expert. All you got to do is get to us and we'll get you to Pat. But thank you for being on. You did a very nice job to talk through all this stuff.
Complex matter, but you guys made it certainly understandable. Appreciate you all being with us, and as always, we really appreciate you being with us as well. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back next week, and we look for you then. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.